Hey, and thanks for taking the time to watch this week's Oldtown short. Stir it up. I wonder, do you ever overthink things? Do you sometimes see the problems all around you and get overwhelmed? Do you often worry about every little detail? I know that I sometimes do. But unfortunately, when we do that, when we get all worked up about things and we worry about the little details, we usually end up losing sight of what really matters. I have to say, I struggled a little bit this week because I read part of a letter, or an epistle as they call it in the Bible. It was chock full of all kinds of important things. You see, James, the brother of Jesus, wrote a letter to a group of people who knew all about Jewish traditions and teachings. In the letter, or epistle, he described to them, and he tells all of us, what a life of faith should look like, and how in living a life of faith, we should choose listening over speaking, and patience over anger, always caring for those who are vulnerable as we do our best to live an ethical life. So as I read part of that letter, my mind jumped to all the important things that I'd heard, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any in today's message. But the more I started to think about it, the more I started to realize that I couldn't preach or talk about all of it. Because if I tried, if I started to go down that long list and tell you about the importance of each one of them, the majority of your eyes would start to glaze over. And while some of you might start writing your grocery list or thinking about things you need to do later today, others might begin thinking about their fantasy football teams or back to school responsibilities. And some of you might even go as far as starting to plan your Thanksgiving dinner. The truth is, my friends, we only have the ability to listen to and to retain so much. And I think that was my problem this week. There was too much to think about, not only in Scripture, but also in the world around me. I had too many ideas in my head and too many tidbits that I was trying to organize. There were too many things that were fighting for importance, and it all felt overwhelming. But the one phrase that kept speaking to me was, do not only be a hearer of the word, but be a doer. Folks, many of us come to worship, whether in person or online, and we're inspired by what we hear, be it the scripture or the sermon or the words to one of the songs. We're filled with joy and energy, and we get excited to go out and make the world a better place. But somehow, once we walk out of the church building or turn off our TV or iPad, our worship world closes and the real world returns. And that joy and excitement that we briefly felt quickly fades away. Because rather than being held in a safe place, rather than hearing the good news, and rather than being surrounded by goodness and grace, we find ourselves out in the world, surrounded by brokenness, struggle, pain, and poor behavior. We turn on the news and we hear horrific stories around the world. We experience fighting and conflicts in our communities and our neighborhoods, and sometimes even in our own homes. We look to social media and we read rude comments, even among people we've seen in worship. And what that means to me is that gathering on Sundays And even spending devotional time during the week, reading scripture and spending time in prayer, just isn't always enough. Because there's an important piece that's missing. You see, we have to take what we've heard and learned and not just hold on to it, but do something with it. But what? Hey, I'm only one person, and we're just a small church. How can we make a difference in this crazy world? How can we begin to heal the broken and feed the hungry when we're so overwhelmed by what we see and experience? Well, as Mother Teresa once said, never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest to you. Friends, I wonder, do any of you like chocolate milk? When I was little, my Nana used to let us have chocolate milk with dinner. She would give each of us a glass of milk, and then she'd pour Hershey's syrup into it. But even though in that moment the chocolate syrup was in the chocolate milk wasn't ready yet. Because pouring chocolate syrup into a glass of milk just gives you a glass of milk with chocolate syrup in the bottom, right? Well, then she'd hand us each a spoon. Because in order to make chocolate milk, you need to do something more. You need to stir it up. So then my brother and I would each stir the chocolate syrup and the milk together and make chocolate milk. And boy, was it delicious. Friends, I think that's what happens sometimes when we go to church or worship online or spend time in Bible study or prayer or meditation or reflection. We're filled with all that goodness and inspiration and energy, just like the chocolate syrup and the milk in the glass. But when we face the struggles and frustrations of the real world, we lose sight of that goodness and inspiration and energy because we didn't finish the job. We heard all about that goodness and inspiration and energy, and we may have even felt it for a moment. But if we never take the next step and do something more, stirring it up as we reach out and share it with the world, then though we may hear about it, it never becomes a part of who we are and how we live. It's just like the chocolate syrup sitting at the bottom of the glass of milk. Friends, it's my hope and my prayer that as you go out into the world today, that you choose to not only worship and listen to the good news, but that you choose to do something more. I hope you go out and do something with it, because that's how you stir up all that goodness and inspiration and energy and make it a part of who you are. Folks, the seeds of our faith may be planted here in worship and in our devotion times, and we may need times of reflection to feed our souls, because that's how we add the sweetness to our faith. But it's in the time that we spend out in the world, doing what we've been taught and encouraged to do, that stirs it all up and makes our faith blossom and shine. Friends, in the week ahead, if you feel frustrated and overwhelmed and you're not sure which way to turn, stop. Take a deep breath. Talk with God and read some scripture. But don't stop there. Remember to stir it up as you go out and do something with it. Smile at someone who isn't expecting it. Write a note to someone who you know is feeling lonely. Share a meal with someone who's having a hard time making ends meet. Pay for the person's coffee in the line behind you at Dunkin' Donuts. Be a listening ear for someone that just needs to be heard. Encourage a child or a teacher as they get ready to go back to school. Friends, the possibilities are endless, and all you need to do is just stir it up as you start to sprinkle seeds of goodness and share a little sweetness wherever you go.